Thanksgiving always had a strange quiet around me, even when the house was loud. My parents' dining room was small for the number of people crammed into it that year. My brother Daniel filled most of the space without trying. His stories carried across the table easily: new promotion, new clients, new plans. Everyone leaned toward him the way people lean toward a fireplace in winter. I sat at the corner of the table with a glass of water I barely touched. It wasn't hostility exactly. It was something more practiced than that. The habit of overlooking me had been built over years, layer by layer, until it felt natural to everyone involved. Daniel talked. My father nodded with approval. My mother laughed in the careful way she reserved for moments she wanted to stretch. Someone eventually asked me how work was going. "Fine," I said. That was enough for them. The conversation slid back toward Daniel without resistance. I watched the turkey pass hands down the table, listened to the clink of forks, the comfortable rhythm of people who believed they understood one another. 5 years earlier, my mother had called me late one night. She tried to sound casual at first. The bank had been difficult lately. The mortgage was tight. "Just a temporary thing," she said, though her voice carried that thin edge of worry she never hid well. I opened my laptop while she spoke, looked at the numbers, looked at my savings. I remember telling her not to worry about it. She thought I meant encouragement. Instead, the next morning, I scheduled the first payment. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was a practical solution. I had the stability. They needed it. Family help rarely requires a speech. At least that's what I believed then. The payments continued quietly after that. Month after month, automatic transfers that disappeared from my account the same way rent or utilities do. The house stayed secure. My parents stopped mentioning financial stress. No one ever asked how things had improved. I never offered an explanation. Back at the table, Daniel was finishing another story about a deal he'd closed. My mother leaned back in her chair with a satisfied look. Then she glanced toward me. It was quick, almost casual. "You know," she said, smiling in that thin way that never quite reached her eyes. "Margaret's always been the sensitive one." A couple people chuckled politely. She took a sip of wine before adding, almost as an afterthought, "Sometimes I think you're just a burden, Margaret. At least your brother makes us proud." The room didn't go silent. It simply paused. Not shock. Just the brief recalibration people make when someone says something slightly uncomfortable at dinner. My father cleared his throat. Daniel shifted in his chair like someone waiting for the conversation to move along. No one objected. For a moment, I looked down at my plate. I thought about the first mortgage payment again. The small relief in my mother's voice months later when she mentioned the bank had backed off. I remembered the budgeting spreadsheets, the nights I passed on vacations or upgrades because that automatic transfer would leave my account in a few days. 5 years. Not resentment, just arithmetic. Something settled quietly in my chest. Not anger. More like the feeling you get when a long question finally receives its answer. I pushed my chair back and stood. The movement was small, but enough to catch attention. My mother looked up with mild irritation, like I had interrupted the natural order of things. I leaned slightly toward her side of the table. My voice stayed low. "Okay," I said gently, "but don't ask me for help when the power goes out." She frowned, confused. Daniel rolled his eyes faintly, already dismissing whatever he thought I meant. I straightened my jacket. No explanation followed. I walked toward the hallway, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside into the cold evening air. Behind me, the house carried on with the sounds of dinner. Forks, glasses, a television turning on somewhere in the living room. Life continuing without interruption. Which was fine. For the first time in years, the next mortgage payment simply didn't happen. No dramatic cancellation. I just removed the automatic transfer. The following month passed quietly, then another. Banks have their own rhythm, their own slow patience before systems begin to speak. The letter arrived first. My father called a week later. His tone was different from usual. Not angry, more unsettled, like someone discovering a piece of reality that had always existed but had never been noticed. "Margaret," he said carefully. "The bank says we're behind on the mortgage." I waited. "They mentioned, previous payments came from your account." There was a long pause on the line. 5 years of silence compressing into one moment of understanding. "I didn't realize," he said. I believed him. "I know," I replied. Another pause followed. Not hostile, just heavy with the quiet rearranging of things people thought they knew. Outside my apartment window, snow had started falling lightly. "Are you stopping the payments?" he asked.
Yes.
The word wasn't sharp, just clear. On the other end of the line, he exhaled slowly. For once, neither of us rushed to fill the silence. I wasn't angry. And I wasn't waiting for gratitude. Sometimes dignity doesn't return with apologies or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it arrives quietly. The moment you stop carrying something no one ever saw you holding.